Let's talk about business. And obviously, this is important to all of us. And everyone here cares about their business. And for most of you in the audience, I will bet that your business isn't working. And that's not a judgment, that's just statistics because of the industry that we happen to be involved in. And so I would encourage you to think about what makes a good restart when you're forced to do it. You can see this in the creative industries. If you've noticed with novelists and musicians and artists, you can probably see how most sequels suck. Anyone who's ever loved the movie The Matrix has seen this experience. And what happens is the first one is great, and the next one or two are just awful. And why is that? And usually it's because the first one took someone 10 years to build up from scratch. It was a work of passion. They poured in everything they'd learned in their life, and they built it from the ground up. And then they have to do the next two in 1 year. And they have to cram them together and ship them out and make some money. So it's because they're not being honest with themselves and willing to start from the ground up and build the new enterprise that the sequels often suck. And if you look at the artists who are extremely successful, the U2s and the Madonnas of the world, they restart all the time. They adopt brand new influences. They go and they learn a new kind of music or a new kind of dance, and they build up from scratch. And what you'll find is that their fans at first hate their new albums. They always say, oh, this is not what I'm used to, this is not what I like. And eventually they come around to it and they appreciate the artist for leading them to a new point of view. So if you're starting a new business and if your current colleagues or your previous colleagues don't hate it or don't think it's a bad idea for you, you're probably not restarting enough. So I would encourage you to definitely push that boundary. Steve Jobs knows this. He's probably the master of this. He built the Apple II and then he threw it over for the Macintosh. And then he built the Macintosh and he threw that over for Next Step. And he built Next Step and he threw that over for OS X. And he changed Motorola 68K to PowerPC on the chip side and then went to Intel. Left behind the floppy disk, the dial-up modem, Adobe Flash. Controversial right now, but he's leaving behind Flash. And now he's killing OS X, his flagship on the Mac, even though he won't admit it, because he knows that the iPhone and the iPad and the iOS are the future of computing. So he has this ability to take what he has done, to throw it out, and to essentially restart. There is almost nothing about the iPhone OS that you can argue is a real, true learning from the Mac OS. It is as close to fresh starts as one can come. So if you're an entrepreneur in this audience, odds are that your startup will fail. Again, that's not a judgment. That's just statistics. Most of my startups failed. If you're a venture investor in this audience, odds are that your business is changing so much that in some sense it will fail also. Companies these days need very little capital. You've probably heard the phrase that seed is a new Series A, but a good web company can find product market fit on well less than $1 million. And by the time the company is successful and they need to raise real venture capital, they're going to go to the top 10 VCs. So if you're not in that branded group, you're going to have a very hard time getting into the successful companies. So in some sense, you're going to have to reinvent your business. But the good news is that although entrepreneurial ventures often fail, entrepreneurs don't fail because they embrace this ability to restart themselves and their businesses. And although venture funds fail, the adventurous capitalists don't fail because they realize what's coming and they restart themselves and their businesses. Problem with restarting, you want to cheat. You want to take what you've done and built and accomplished in the past, and you want to use that. And the cheats are subtle, but after a while you start noticing them. An example is a serial entrepreneur. You don't want to work as hard, so you kind of try and outsource entrepreneurship. A lot of entrepreneurs I know will say that they want to be a chairman or a producer, and they want some mentor someone. And really what that's code for is, I don't want to be at the office at 11 p.m. 6 days a week. But that's not an honest restart because the guy down the street, the first timer who's competing with you, is going to do that. And the guys coming out of Y Combinator, they have no lives. They're going for ramen profitability. That's the competition. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to recharge, rest, and be willing to embrace an honest restart. Similarly, if you're an investor, you probably have your own version of this failure mode, which is your first fund might have been $20 or $30 or $40 million, and you invested that well, and you hustled. And your next fund is 50 or 100, and next thing you know, your franchise is all over the world, and you've got all kinds of funds working for you, and you're sitting on Sand Hill Road, and you're waiting for entrepreneurs to come to you because of the capital. And my challenge to you would be, if you are an investor, brand yourself and figure something out so an entrepreneur will put you on their board, even if you never gave them a dime of your capital. That is a true test of whether you're a value-added investor or not. And I think that is a bar that people are going to be held to over time. So I think it's very important to think about restarts in your business and be very honest with yourself as to how to do them in a manner that you don't cheat. And then finally, the last place I want to talk about restarts is in relationships and personal relationships. And this is probably the one place where you shouldn't do it too often. I think, as you may know, there's a lot of studies on happiness, and most of them show that we get happier in our older age. Not always true, but often true. And that's counterintuitive, but I think the reason for that is because early in life, our relationships are thrust upon us. Our friendships are based on proximity and who we went to college with and who else liked Pearl Jam when we happen to like Pearl Jam. And our families are the ones that we're stuck with, but we put no effort into those. We take those for granted. And our lovers and our romances are based on physical attraction. Then we rationalize them afterwards. But I think that as you get a little older, you start becoming a lot more selective about your relationships because you just run out of time. And you realize that the people that you want to associate with in business, for example, it's not whoever has the most LinkedIn connections or happen to sit in the cubicle next to you. It's going to be someone who's very high intelligence, very high energy, and most importantly, very high integrity, which is something you only figure out after years of working with someone. Your friends are going to be based on mutual chemistry and good values and people who support you in times of crisis. Your family is always going to be there. You don't get to choose them. And so you have to work to fix those relationships and make them great because they're the ones that will last your entire life. And then I believe you can have the relationships in place after you've restarted them consciously, after you've chosen who you want to be with. Then you can pick the people that you can invest in for decades. And I think people are investments in that when you invest in those relationships, they will return you compound interest. I'm a big fan of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and they always talk about how one shouldn't churn their relationships or their businesses because the real rewards come 20 or 30 or 40 years down the line. So I guess in parting, I would say this conference is about the launch, but I also want to leave you with a concept of the relaunch. If there's something in your life that's not working, and there always is for all of us, nothing ever lines up completely, I would encourage you to embrace that failure and use it as an opportunity to completely rebuild yourself. There's no reason to be locked into your past consistency. There's no reason to say, this is who I am, or I'm too old, or I can't start over, I don't want to do it again. That's where kind of the fun and the energy in life comes. And I think for those of you who are entrepreneurs in the audience, you'll be forced to do it. There's no way out of it. Those of you who are investors, it's a slower cycle. It takes 10 years to figure out if you're good at the investing business or not. But as soon as you do, it might be time for a fresh change and a restart even in the investing business as that industry is changing. And I think there are many opportunities here, not just to launch, but also to consider the relaunch. Thank you.